That fucking introduction is absolutely ridiculous. It's fucking ridiculous. Hello and welcome to the Gooners podcast, where tonight we'll look back at our 4-1 win over Molde yesterday in the Europa League. Obviously, to do that now, I've got three guests joining me. But before I do that, I'd like to sort of introduce myself, because even though I was on this the other day with Mike and Andy, I never really got a chance to speak, what them two are like. So, first of all, my name's Owen. I'm a friend of the boys, and I host my own podcast as well, Gooner Crack. I was a regular on, and still am a regular on, the Gooner Talk TV. And basically, the lads have asked me to come in so that they can ride the wave of my talent, essentially. I think they're getting a little lazy in their old age. But yeah, Owen is a name that seems to confuse everybody, that I seem to run into on football Twitter. So here I've got a little video clip of Mike just explaining exactly how to pronounce that name.
We are looking at how to pronounce this traditional Irish name. How do you go about pronouncing it? Not like it's spelled, but simply Owen.
Ian.
Owen.
Ian.
Owen.
Ian.
Owen. Here are many more videos on.
No, he's a special kind of person, Mike. But yeah, as I say, three guests we'll have with us this evening. First up, Jared. Jared is a good friend of mine and a regular on the Gooner Crack podcast as well. So how's things, Jared? Making the jump over to the big leagues here? Well, if you would, I'm sort of flattering the two boys in saying that.
I think you're flattering all of us a little bit, but yeah, happy to join up and chat with you guys.
No, it's good. And as I say, I'm sort of hoping you do well on this tonight, but not too well, because you'll be plucked out from under me, no doubt, because as well as being two overweight middle-aged men, they're also thieving bastards. But then next up, we've got John. John is the host of 305 Cast. Get over and check that out. John, how's things, mate?
Things good. Thanks for having me on.
No problem at all, buddy. An absolute pleasure. And do we have Chris? Is Chris there, or is he currently drowning? We've just been told before the podcast that Chris's condo is currently flooding.
Yeah.
So
I think he's dealing with flood situation now.
Yeah, it's like him and his missus are going full Titanic, trying to get themselves onto a door. Yeah, no, but look, we'll get stuck into Chris once he gets back. Guys in the live chat, throw over any questions you have throughout the show to our guests, and I'll be sure to put them up at any points, stick them in there too. But lads, we'll get stuck straight in. 4-1 over Molde, I would say, is probably slightly flattering given the performance. I think if there was ever a patchy performance in terms of certain individuals doing well and certain individuals sort of failing to seize their opportunities, it was that game. But Jared, in terms of the lineup, as I mentioned before, that 60 minutes before a match is probably the worst 60 minutes in football. I think you've sort of prejudged opinions flying about and people overreacting about a lot of it, but it was probably quite surprising to see the strength of the lineup he went for. But were you surprised by much of it, or was it what you expected overall?
It was more or less what I expected. It was definitely a strong lineup to face a team like Molde or Molde, however you pronounce that. But I think we've seen in Arteta's time here, he tends to put out a fairly strong squad in all those games. I think he has the mindset that, he never wants to lose any of them. And whether it's all competitions or Premier League, he'd love to just put a string together and kind of build some momentum, especially going into another international break. Looking at the lineup, I mean, it wasn't long ago if you saw, Xhaka, Ceballos, David Luiz. I mean, these were a lot of the core pieces of our Premier League side. So definitely a strong lineup for that game. But, they went out there, and the beginning, while they controlled the game well, just kind of like we've seen all season, the final product was lacking a little bit. But we saw some really good performances. Willock was fantastic. I'm sure we'll all kind of probably touch on him. He's been great the last couple of games in Europa League and has really shown well. I thought Granit Xhaka played a really good game, but when you're a guy who's captain a big six side for a number of games, it's a game you should command and play well in. And he did, and I thought he looked great. He's going to solve our creative problems leading the break coming up here from here on out. But I thought that play was a little. Europa League games can get a little odd in that he's in there at center back, and then the next thing he's the furthest forward leading a break, and he looked like he was ready to pass that ball. I think he had done all the running he wanted to do on that one, and luckily there were some guys making runs to get it to.
Mhm.
But I thought he played a great game. He had a nice little kind of flick over the defender in the box to Willock late in the game that was good. And, overall, what can you say? It's a team you should go out and beat pretty handily. We controlled the game relatively well and got the win. So it was about what I expected. And, we'll take the win and move on and hopefully carry that momentum into the weekend.
Yeah, and I think probably something that I was quite surprised about, and maybe I didn't even realise it until yesterday evening, halfway through the game, I think it was, is that when you look at that side that was out yesterday, that was probably our second string team at the minute. But a season and a half ago, that would have been the quality, bar a few, of our full starting 11. So in terms of showing progress, I think that made it evident last night just how far we have come in such a short space of time in terms of personnel. But Christopher, something that was sort of, it's not even just last night, sort of even since the start of Mikel Arteta's tenure, that it always sort of causes debate is formations. We're always constantly hearing, we should play the 3-4-3, or we should transition to a 4-3-3 or 4-2-3-1 and such. But something that was very apparent to me last night was, again, that we were all expecting a 4-3-3, and then at times it seemed to be a 3-4-3. Do you think that people are starting to read too much into formations now? Do you think that this is becoming, fans are making this too much of a pressing matter, when maybe, do you think that maybe Arteta doesn't really have the same sort of respect for a rigid system as everybody else?
It's totally different from what you'd expect under Wenger. You knew that every time he trotted out his team, it was 4-4-2 at the beginning and eventually morphed into that 4-2-3-1. I think with Arteta, and I think what you've seen with Pep and a lot of managers, even Nagelsmann, is that they're really fluid in their formations. They're no longer doing the traditional kind of whatever formation's your base formation. You're trotting out the same kind of tactics throughout the entire game. What they do in a defense and attack is totally different depending on the opponent. I just don't think he has any regard for whatever kind of team sheet he puts in at the beginning. And oftentimes, like, even if we see the kind of Arsenal Instagram posts, it's totally different. Like, players are lined up in positions that they aren't traditionally in. And I think part of it is probably just to throw off the opposing teams and also the fans just at the very start, to kind of rile them up and think that, we've got a set formation. This is exactly what we're going to be doing. So I think it's fluid, and it's better that way because it's just more flexible.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, with Granit Xhaka, something we've seen so frequently is him making that move to transition from midfield into an almost left back role to allow the left back to sort of get up the pitch. And often I even thought that was maybe just something that Granit Xhaka was bringing on himself. But even in the United match, I seen Mohamed Elneny doing the exact same thing. So this is obviously something that's being drilled into them. And, we talk about 3-4-3 and 4-3-3. And really, I think we're seeing the combination of both. I really don't think that there is going to be that sort of dramatic switch that everybody's expecting, ever since Thomas Partey has come through the door. But John, this is a man I've seen you defend just absolutely numerous times since the departure of Emi Martinez. But Bird Leno put himself in the sort of firing line again. Last night, I would say that over the past couple of weeks, this is probably in terms of nerves and maybe mistakes, that this is the sort of most fragile we've seen Bird Leno since he signed the contract, or since he signed for the club. Do you hold him responsible for that mistake last night? And what do you think maybe the sort of pressure of the fan base, did we sell the wrong keeper fucking argument going on? Do you think that that's adding pressure to Bird Leno?
So I'll start with the first aspect of it. And the reality of it is, I don't think it's one particular mistake. I think it's a group of mistakes that led to that goal that you're talking about last night. I think Leno's positioning could have been a little better, but at the same time, you expect your midfield and defense to be able to close down that attacker a lot more than what happened. And that's right. So when you look at the actual goal, he almost got it. Which means that it was just a little bit off. So even with the bad positioning or let's not call it bad, let's call it less than ideal positioning of Bird Leno, and the I don't know what was happening with the midfield and with Kolasinac on that left hand side, defending our left hand side. So look, like I said, it's an amalgam of different issues that created that goal last night. I'm not going to point my finger at Leno, and I know some people were. Now, for the second part of that question, it was the Martinez one, and I think it's I don't want to call it a ridiculous argument because I think that you can make a valid claim based off of how he was playing for us. But when you look at the statistics, like the deep lying statistics and the context of Martinez's tenure at this club, it was obvious for anyone that was paying attention that this was a purple patch for Martinez. He's a great keeper, and I think he's improved a lot, and he really stepped up at the end for us. But I mean, the guy collected 100% out of every cross that came into our box while he played for us. None of that was going to be sustainable when you're looking at the stats now that show that he's conceded the most goals outside the box in the Premier League out of any keeper. I'm not saying, I don't want to, I don't like this argument because it makes me like, because you have to say it's one or the other, and I don't want to put Martinez down. But when you're asking me, did we sell the wrong keeper? I can't look at those stats and be comfortable saying, yeah, we sold the wrong keeper. I think and when you look at the greater gamut of statistics that we have for Leno in a time where our defense was awful. He faced more shots than any keeper in Europe, and he saved us multiple games. He would save us. So, look, I love Martinez. I always will. He's been here for a long time. He did his thing. He brought up his value, and then we sold him, and he helped us make important deals in the summer. So I can't really fault the guy. Am I happy he's gone? No, I'd like him to be a backup keeper. I'd still like, because these are the kind of games that he would have played, and I would have liked to see that. But look, he's not an Arsenal player anymore. We have Leno. Leno is an excellent keeper. And that one goal aside, sure, there's been some shaky moments, but look, we have the best defense in the league. We have conceded.
When do you ever think you'd say that?
Right? We have conceded the least goals in the league. He's part of that. So I really hope that we can start to put that argument to bed. And it's one of those things that's always going to come up when we play him, because we're playing Martinez on Sunday. So it's going to be relevant, and it should be interesting. I hope he continue. Sorry, Martinez, but I hope you continue that conceding outside the box statistic run going, because I'd like to see some bangers on Sunday.
Yeah. See, going back to the goal, I will say this, and you'll sort of stand by me on this, John, because it's something I often put into the WhatsApp group, is that a concern I have is Bernd Leno's. I don't know whether it's that he's lackadaisy with his distribution, or whether he's indecisive. And
that's a good question.
The one thing that I would like to see from Bernd Leno there, and look, I'm not going to, as you said, the amount that man has saved us, arguably over, since the day he signed, he's been our second best player. But what I would have liked to have seen him do is to move the rest of the team up before hitting the ball. Especially, you look at Eddie Nketiah, he isn't physically the most sort of imposing player on the pitch. He was completely isolated. So it was just, I think it was a nothing ball that he thought he was going to get away with. And unfortunately, when you're playing the way that we do, you're sort of setting yourselves up to play out from the back. The natural thing that you have to do is create space between yourself and the opposition players. But unfortunately, when the ball gets overturned in the manner that it did, it leaves you completely sort of exposed. So I would say that Bernd Leno was at fault for the goal, but I think by his reaction, he realised that too. I don't think he was putting blame on anybody else but himself. But in terms of the Emi Martinez thing, I just think that I think it's ridiculous, as you said, to now still be arguing at this point whether we sold the wrong keeper when that other keeper is wearing another shirt and has been for a substantial amount of time now. And I think, but what I also don't like, is that on social media outlets, another thing that I've seen is that every time Emi Martinez makes a mistake, they're ridiculing him and scrutinising. You remember the love that man showed for this club only mere months ago, so I think I've mentioned it before that we need to get out of this habit of pick one side or the other. You know what I mean? It doesn't have to be a personal vendetta against players. It's just ridiculous,
Yeah, that's a good point. And the way I look at it, with at least with Martinez from that perspective, the guy gave everything for this club. I have no ill will towards the guy, but I hope he lets in 4 on Sunday.
yeah, and Riley's going to have an absolute fucking stormer.
They always do, and that's the thing. Any ex-Arsenal keeper that plays against us becomes like Manuel Neuer or something. It's unreal the kind of the stop power that these guys have when they play against us. It's like it energizes them or something.
Yeah,
I hope he turns into like I don't know who's Kepa or something, whatever, something.
Yeah. No, I wouldn't wish that upon. I wouldn't wish that upon.
Just for this game, and then go back to.
Yeah.
I mean, I hope Martinez plays 36 fantastic games.
Enough that they don't. If they're if they're in the top 4 with us, great. I don't care.
Yeah.
Oh, can I get back on your point about Leno? I think what you're alluding to is his arrogance. He kind of has an arrogance that, I'm always going to save that shot. I'm always going to be able to get there in time. And it almost comes across as a bit lackadaisical. But it's that same arrogance that allows him to bounce back so quickly. So it's you kind of take the good with the bad in that. And that, even if he's not going to make that shot, you're confident that when the next one comes, he's more than likely going to save it, which can't always be said about someone like Emmy. His track record is that often when the going gets tough, sometimes he would fold under pressure. I still remember that Reading game. That for some reason, that one game sticks out in my mind in the Carabao Cup when we won 7-5, but the 5 goals that we let in, at least 3 or 4 of them were just horrendous.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually a good point. And remember, like the thing about Leno is remember he came out, he was kind of cocky. He was like, no, I'm number one. Like I don't understand what everyone's talking about. I've always been number one. I'm always going to be number one. But you kind of want your keeper to be like that. You don't want your keeper.
As a goalkeeper, I think you have to have that sort of self-belief in that self, because if you're talking about a position where you're solely exposed as an individual, it's a goalkeeper. I mentioned only last week that it's the only position on the pitch that you don't feel like you have a partner. If you're a centre back, you have a centre back partner. If you're a full back, you've got a winger that you work with. Everybody's working with each other, but a goalkeeper's just exposed on their own. So yeah, but look here, I think we all know one thing, that our fan base is a reactionary fan base, and to call Bernd Leno's ability into question is just absolutely ludicrous at this point. But Jared, somebody whose ability has been called into question on numerous occasions by different people. Yes, I'm just going to remove you from the podcast right now. Granit Xhaka. Granit Xhaka, that is 2 Europa League fixtures in a row that Granit Xhaka has featured, and with the sort of increased levels of performance, I don't even think that does it justice. From Mohamed El-Neni, which we'll cover in more detail later in regards to El-Neni. But do you think that we could possibly be seeing the sort of the demotion of Xhaka from regular sort of first team football? Do you think that his minutes are possibly going to be limited now in the near future?
Maybe a bit, but I don't think it's a bad thing. I think, he played the Europa League game yesterday and he played really well. I think kind of the emergence of El-Neni, the emergence of Willock is great. I mean, I think having competition in that spot is a great thing. The midfield, we've obviously been really weak the last couple of years. And I think it kind of just forces those guys into a competitive environment where they know if they don't perform well, there's going to be someone else there who will step in like El-Neni and take the spot. Before last Sunday's game, I thought, even when I saw the lineup, was El-Neni will get a game, and then I thought it was likely we'd see Xhaka kind of step back into that spot this weekend. But when someone goes out and puts a performance in like El-Neni and really grabs that spot, I can't imagine him getting dropped now. So I think we will see Xhaka more in the Europa League games potentially if El-Neni stays on form, but like I said, that's a good thing. If El-Neni drops off, I guarantee you he's going to be motivated to step in and regain that spot and try and hold it down himself. So while he may lose some minutes in the short term, I think for Arsenal as a whole, it's a great thing to have a real competition for those places, especially in a spot where we've been really weak the last couple of years. Yeah,
for sure. And I think it's sort of sad as well, because after the sort of the resurgence of Granit Xhaka, if you will, that's come at a bad time, because I think the majority of people, the vast majority of people, wanted Granit Xhaka to succeed this season and do well, and they thought that partnership with Thomas Partey and Granit Xhaka could work. But I know it's stupid to base it off one game, but in the Leicester game, you've seen that Granit Xhaka really wants to be the mainstay in that midfield. He wants to be the vocal point in that midfield, and so does Thomas Partey. And I just don't think when you have two players of that knack, two people who want to be the vocal point, it doesn't work. You've seen it with, like, the perfect example of midfield harmony is Vieira and Gilberto Silva. That Gilberto was very, very willing to be the sort of backseat driver within that partnership. But Chris, somebody that we have seen and somebody that I've wrote off in the past slightly as well, hit a patch of form, and I think we really need to put into context the level of opposition that he has been facing, to be fair. But somebody that has sort of been a bright light within that Europa League game, and arguably I think was responsible for three of our goals going in yesterday, whether they were put in by opposition players or not. I think he provided the sort of drive to cause those errors, was Joe Willock. Now, we are sort of well known to be in a patch lacking creativity. We have no real vocal point in midfield, anybody to drive the ball forward. I know Thomas Partey has the ability to carry the ball, but in terms of running beyond the striker and getting in behind those defenders, we don't have a player like that. What have you made of Joe Willock's form, and do you think that he should be in contention now to possibly start those games and plug that hole that we seem to be missing?
Right before I get to Willock, I just want to make a comment on Xhaka. Did anyone know that he was able to run that fast? When I saw him at the lead of that fast break on the counter, I had to double check my TV just to see who that was.
There's this misconception that he's this like slow play. Like he's an athlete, man. He's an international athlete. Like he's not that slow. But that was pretty fast from him even. So so if you look at his stats, he had the most forward passes, he had the most final third passes, 3 pre-assists, 88 touches, 74 accurate passes, 7 out of 8 long balls, 3 out of 4 duels, 1 clearance, 2 tackles, 2 interceptions. He was never dribbled past once the entire game, and he ran faster than I've ever seen him run. So the guy had a great game. So if he's trying to get in the first team, those are the kind of performances you need, and it's the kind of performance you need to set an example for the young players like you're saying Willock and those guys. Because remember, I've said it before, that when you look at players like Martinelli and Saka, the Europa League was that kind of challenging thing for them to break out in the Europa League. And, when you're having a player in there, it's just good stuff. It's good stuff.
It just makes you want to see more of that from Xhaka, and hopefully we will going forward. But to your question, Owen, on Willock, he's been brilliant. I wasn't expecting this going into the season. I think we had many chats on TBT and in the Discord group. It was he seemed like that player that was just always a bit off the mark. He couldn't combine. He wasn't making those forward runs. It looked like his awareness was very low, but something's just switched on since that Dundalk game. Even in the preseason game against MK Dons, he looked completely out of sorts, and that was against a League 2 side. So when you're thinking about it, maybe Willock's the better player to go on loan, but it's turned out Emile Smith-Rowe, Nelson, we've looked at a whole bunch of different players that everyone said, they're more talented than Willock. They're probably going to make that breakthrough in the first team, but it turns out the healthiest guy might end up being the one that makes that Saka-like breakthrough this season. Specifically on his skill set, there's been some great articles on The Athletic that just outlines that Willock offers us something that no one else in the team currently provides right now. And it's not just the forward runs into the box, but it's that ability to beat a man on the dribble in the middle of midfield and also have those nice, intricate 1-2 combinations. He has that Hale End blood and DNA in him that he's able to understand exactly the way that Arteta wants Arsenal to set up. And it's something that he's been doing since he was a very young boy in the academy. So just being able to have that awareness and that intelligence, he's quickly growing into a player that I think many of us, maybe not many of us, but Ramsey, when he first came back from his injury, many people said, he's never going to be the same player. He's just Arsene Wenger's kind of favorite. And we're holding on to something there that he's never going to progress as a player. And I think it was that 2013-14 season that he really kind of broke out again and kind of got that goal scoring form. So I think it's too early to write off Willock. He's got a lot. He's 20 years old. I think he's got a lot of time ahead of him. And even as an industrious midfielder who's got a great engine, there's always going to be value in that aspect. And if he can kind of just improve that creativity and awareness in that final third, he's going to be a great player. It's just we need to afford him more opportunities to get there and just continue to be patient with him.
Yeah, and I think something I said was that if you if you're Joe Willock, as you say, you're that 20, 21-year-old lad sitting on the bench, and you look and you see visibly something lacking from our starting 11, which is creativity, which is drive from midfield, which is somebody running beyond the striker, then at every given opportunity, you go out, and whether it's part of your natural game or not, or it's something you normally do, you go out and you make a point to go and sort of show them attributes off to the manager as much as possible, to stake a claim for an opportunity. Now, the one thing I would sort of worry about with Joe Willock is that we have seen this from him before. We have seen great Europa League performances, great Carabao Cup. Remember his performance against Liverpool in the Carabao Cup when we went out in penalties was absolutely phenomenal in that game. But it seems to me that when he gets into those Premier League games, he just gets overwhelmed and overrun often. Now, to see maybe whether that year has sort of made him physically mature, and sort of his decision making was questionable at times too. But it's definitely something I'm open to 100%. I think that if we were to play with the midfield three with the sort of number 10 in there, that he probably naturally fits that mold more so than almost anybody. But John, somebody who probably would fit that mold more than anybody at the club is Emile Smith-Rowe. Now, unfortunately, we were all looking forward to, I think, maybe seeing Emile Smith-Rowe either against Dundalk or last night. They had come out and said that they expected him to be fit for this evening, but that wasn't the case. To me, Emile Smith-Rowe, it's a frustrating one, because this seems like a reoccurring theme, that Emile Smith-Rowe gains a bit of momentum in terms of reputation, that opportunities sort of seem to present themselves, and then he gets injured. And something that I'm concerned about, well, I suppose my question to you is, do you see a future for Emile Smith-Rowe in that number 10 position at Arsenal? But a comment I've made here on my notes is that I see parallels between Jack Wilshere and Emile Smith-Rowe. Do you see this sort of injury-littered career being a consistent thing for Emile Smith-Rowe? Do you think that these injuries could really be sort of narrowing the gap that he's going to get at this club?
I mean, the difference between Jack is that he was getting chances in the first team. So, even though it was injury riddled and everything like that, like, he had the opportunity to stake his claim. I don't think Emile Smith-Rowe has had that opportunity, and I don't know if it's necessarily because of him as a player. I think it might just be like kind of unfortunate circumstances. But when you're looking at the competition amongst these young players in this midfield right now, and you're looking at the player, even players like Xhaka, who are arguably kind of sidelined to Europa League right now. Whether or not that's going to be the plan going forward is a different discussion. But at least ostensibly, it looks like Xhaka might even have a tough time getting into the midfield. So it's definitely concerning, because I think that most Arsenal fans rate him. I certainly do, as a player and as a talent and exciting kind of potential for the future. But this is that kind of carpe diem moment for these young players right now, especially in the Europa League. And we're seeing such success in terms of breakthroughs. I mentioned a little bit earlier with Saka and Martinelli, and now we're seeing it with Willock, and, even Rob Holding stepping in. He's not really a younger player, but like in the same length in the same age group as your Emile Smith-Rowes and your Willocks and your Sakas, but he's still a younger player, and he's stepping up when he needs to. So there's definitely space in the team, but it's really crowding up fast, and everyone's kind of taking the bull by the horns here. So when you're looking at it from a kind of comparison to Jack Wilshere, I think the ultimate difference is that I think Jack had more chances. He was a first team player for us. Emile Smith-Rowe is not that player for us. So I think he needs to actually, get a little lucky to even be in the position where he could maybe get injured and not play for the first team, instead of get injured and not play for, in Europa League and stuff like that. So it's concerning to me. I'm not concerned he's going to be the Jack player, because I feel like arguably his trajectory is even a little bit more, I don't want to say depressing, because it's not. Maybe for him, I'm sure it is, but definitely, it's definitely fraught with a lot of difficulties. His progression right now, and while Jack did have that moment to shine, I mean, come on, he was holding FA Cups and stuff like that. He was playing against top six teams away. That's was Jack. We're not seeing that with Emile Smith-Rowe. So, I hope, because I think he's a talented player, and it'd be a real shame if we have to loan him out or something else again, because I was really looking forward to keeping him and seeing him seeing him on the team. So maybe it's a matter of time, but he really needs to get a good string of luck in terms of his injury and his kind of fitness record, and get a good consistent run of games, which is what we're going to start seeing from Willock.
Yeah, and see, that's what I meant when I alluded to the closing of the gap, because I think if there was ever an opportunity for Emile Smith-Rowe to get a consistent run of games within our side, even in the Premier League, I think it was this season, because as we know, that guy has been left out of the squad. He's not playing. Joe Willock is still very much on the fringes, but now he has the opportunity to push himself into contention for that position. As you alluded to as well, it's already sort of congested enough. And then I think when we get to January, we are likely to see some form of purchase of a player in that position as well. So that's what I meant by, I think this is his perfect window of opportunity. And I suppose somebody else that you could put into that bracket as well is Reece Nelson. And it isn't that I don't think that these players have a good future or a bright future. It's that they are in congested positions with other players of brilliant quality. And even after Reece's showing against Dundalk, when you look at, we have Willian in there who's on a 2-year deal, 3-year deal. We have Nicola Pepe, a now £72 million investment, who's going to see a lot of minutes. We have Gabriel Martinelli, who looked like an absolute world beater at the time, and we have Bukayo Saka, who just looks absolutely phenomenal as well. So I think Reece Nelson's opportunities are going to be extremely limited as well, much like ASR. But Jared, speaking of Reece Nelson's position and the congestion within that position, that right wing slot is something that has sort of been debated. I think you've got your team Willian and you've got your team Pepe. Every single week it seems like there's one half of the fan base is shouting at the other as to which one should be starting. But something that we seen last night was both of them take to the field. For you, who is your choice to start in that position, and why? What did last night show you as to sort of back up your point?
So my choice there, and Chris is already laughing. My choice for that spot is Pepe. He and I have had a pretty lengthy conversation about this. The fact that we have people in both camps shows you that neither guy's really stepped up and kind of grabbed hold of the position for themselves, which isn't ideal. I saw in the press conference that Arteta said, people say, he's performed well in the Europa League. What's it going to take for him to get a run in the Premier League? And he said, he has to show it consistently and for 90 minutes. And I think kind of the catch-22 there for both guys is when you say you need to show consistency to kind of hold down that spot, but then neither guy is getting the consistent playing time. It's a little tough, I think, to do that. But I go with Pepe just more so for the ceiling. I think with Willian, we've kind of, what you're going to get. And people, kind of criticize Pepe, and in some cases fairly. He hasn't, blown the doors off since he's gotten here. But this season, neither has Willian. He had a couple assists in that first game, and then since then really hasn't done much. The Europa League game yesterday, Pepe didn't do a lot for most of the game, and then comes out with a goal and an assist, whereas Willian didn't do a lot for the whole of the game, and then just comes out, period, and gets taken off, and we get nothing out of him. So I think at this point, he's done more to hold it down. Over the last year, no one other than Aubameyang's got more goal contributions than Pepe does. Even this season, he may even lead the team in goal contributions this year. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but while he is sort of up and down and you don't see it for the full 90 minutes, he's that guy who has the ability when he catches his stride and has those little flash moments, he can make something happen. And in a team where we really, really lack goals some games, I think it's hard to take out a guy who's, I think, more of a goal threat of the two currently. So that's kind of why I would lean his direction. And just a quick note on ESR. I thought John made a great point that, the Europa League midfield is just really crowded right now with Xhaka and Ceballos both playing yesterday. It doesn't look like he was pulled from that game for fitness reasons. He scored twice for the under-23s today. That's what I was going to say. So if ever there's a guy making an effort to kind of force his way into at least Europa League games, he's trying to do it, and hopefully he can stay healthy and give it a run, and we'll see what we get from him from here.
I mean, this is a good position to be in. What do you think, Owen? What do you think we're in a good position right now with all this,
Yeah, I do, but see, this is something I was talking about when we were discussing the Cedric Suarez signing, and it's that people say the competition is good, and I agree. that competition is good within professional football. But at the end of the day, you can't have two high quality players in each position, because you're always going to have an extremely unhappy player. So I think that at times you have to have people like, for example, Cedric Suarez, who is happy to be a backup, who to have a Mohamed El Neni, who we'll touch on again in more detail later, who has the attitude to be a backup. With Danny Ceballos, I don't see that. And I think it's probably a good thing that we have him on loan for this year, because we can gauge whether we actually need him for next season or not. But in terms of the likes of the youngsters, I think at the minute we're probably looking at a squad with a lot of aging players, and within the next 2 years there will be more avenues into the first team for these players. I think it's it's about being patient and maybe being more open to loan deals. We heard the likes of Reece Nelson turned down a loan deal. We heard the club were apparently trying to work out a loan deal for Joe Willock at one point as well, but I don't think he was overly keen. But I think that that's a pride thing with them players, that I think they should maybe be slightly more open to the fact that that could sort of further their development as players and give them a better avenue into the first team. Like you look, for example, Balogun. I really think that Balogun should be probably penning a new deal with the club, going out on a year or two's loan. By that time, Lacazette seems like he's aging faster than most. Aubameyang will at that time will be 33. So that leaves that striking position wide open, you know. So I think that I would like to see more loan deals being done in January or the summer, put it that way, you know, for the development of these young players. The last thing I think we want is a group of stagnating young talent that isn't developing or getting enough game time. But Chris, you're a positive kind of bloke. All right, and even though that was a 4-1 result, and I don't want to sound as if I'm some sort of fucking, you know, that I'm always trying to be on a downer, but I really don't think that performance was as good as the result was. There was a lot of holes to pick, like we've done so far. You know, you can see from some of the subjects we've covered. But if you had to take some positives out of that game to take us into the Villa game, what would they be?
For me, like, even despite the 2 own goals that we had, we put ourselves in that position to actually get those own goals. And a lot of people are going to look at the final score and say, yeah, you won, but 2 of them were own goals. But it kind of gives that belief in the team that if you create more chances in the manner of just getting the ball towards the net, good things are probably going to happen. How often have you seen, like, throughout the season, where we've been taking a look at our setup, and as soon as the low block comes, we're just passing the ball around the block and then going further and further backward throughout the whole match. So it's like just putting the ball more into the box through crosses, through passing, through shots. I think one of the stats that John brought up earlier is that Emi Martinez has led the most goals from outside of the box in the Premier League. And I think Arsenal should take advantage of that. But when was the last time we took a shot from outside the box? I think Thomas Partey's shot last game against United was one of the few that I've ever seen. We just simply don't shoot the ball enough. So one of the positives that I will take from that is that our players are starting to get into more of a rhythm offensively. We're starting to see that, you know, we have that belief that we can create those opportunities to help break down a low block. So for me, it's just getting the repetition, like kind of the reps out there. You're looking at more competition for places. We have a deep squad, but we have people like Ceballos and Xhaka and Willock that are coming in to kind of push El Neni and Partey to consistently perform. And if they don't, they're going to be replaced. So for me, that's kind of the biggest takeaway. And if I have some time, I just want to kind of go back to Jared's point.
Pepe, I was waiting for this. Let's go.
Pepe, we're not on opposite side. We're not just on opposite sides of the border. We're also on opposite sides of this debate now. So we've got the whole, like, for me, I think of what I like. You listen to Arteta's post-match comments, and he really highlights the fact that we're working with Pepe on the fundamentals, a lot of the basic things that a footballer needs to be good at, and those are the things that Pepe sometimes struggles with. He says Nico, but I know we're talking about Pepe here. And for him, he wants consistency throughout an entire 90 minutes. And when he's in that final third, he needs to kind of be having a presence, making an impact constantly throughout a game. What he's saying is it's not just about perfection, because players are going to lose the ball. You're going to be dispossessed as you're trying new things, but it's having the awareness and the intelligence of when to take a guy on, when to make a quick pass, when to make an intelligent run. some of these things don't come naturally to Pepe. He does the hard things really, really well. He can finish. He can play that beautifully weighted pass to Willock on his goal yesterday. But then he struggles with things like making an easy read, passing a ball on the break, crossing a ball to the teammate, and not sending it out of bounds. So it's just some of those things that are kind of the difference between Willian and Pepe, is that Willian's probably not going to win you a game like Pepe can on his day, but Willian's going to make those easy little decisions, keep possession of the ball, hold on to it, know when to kind of lay it off, move the ball quickly. Okay, it's a very good comment. But it's just having some of those like little nuances of the game that Arteta prefers that veteran presence of Willian. I know he can be a bit bland. He's not probably going to change the game on his own, but he's offering Arteta something in his structure that he wants right now that Pepe simply isn't. He isn't up to speed there yet, but it's not to say that he can't be that player towards maybe midway through the season. We saw at the end of last season, he was improving by leaps and bounds as the season went on. And I think in the Discord, someone did say that with Pepe, perhaps it's the birth of his first child that's kind of holding him back a bit mentally. So maybe as the season progresses and he gets a little bit further removed from that, we'll see a different version of him.
Yeah, people didn't have children in the 90s or early 2000s. Who was it that actually, I think, left the hospital and went straight to the football pitch for a kickoff? Was it Ballack, maybe? Michael Ballack. But in terms of Pepe, look,
Arteta said that he was, his wife, didn't she give birth and then he came back or something? He was like, he did his physical therapy right there on the table. So like,
oh yeah, he was at the same time. Yeah. She wasn't too happy apparently about it.
No, she wasn't.
But in terms of Pepe, I was saying to you earlier, Chris, when we were messaging that, it's a weird one here because Nicola Pepe clearly I don't think suits what Mikel Arteta wants from his wingers. Now, if you were to ask me what type of winger he would want, and this is maybe a weird one because he didn't play him a lot at the start, it's Gabriel Martinelli, the hard-working, powerful running, good dribbler. That's what I think he wants. But Mikel Arteta has no loyalty to Nicola Pepe because he wasn't one of his signings. He wasn't one of his players. It isn't maybe the profile of player that he wants. Obviously, he wants to get the best out of him. He wants to see his players succeed. But in terms of, he wasn't a part of that 72 million going out. So, if he isn't the best player to suit the system, I don't think he's going to use him. Now, the one argument I would make is that Nicola Pepe has played under two very structured managers that are very rigid in their systems. Everything's coached down to a fine detail. And I just wonder whether Nicola Pepe needs more freedom. We often see Pepe come alive when he runs into those central areas. And I just don't know. I think that Mikel Arteta has to make the decision now whether he can alter Pepe's playing style to suit his system or what he wants to do with a player who doesn't suit his system. I think it's a very tricky one. And unfortunately, look, people say that we shouldn't think about it, but unfortunately, the amount of money that was paid for the player comes into the argument when you're talking about that. It's gonna make it more of a headline talking point than it needs to be, really. But lads, if you can stick your man of the match into the chat, everybody in the live chat, throw in who you thought was the man of the match against Molde. And we're going to move on to the Aston Villa game. So, John, one thing we've seen last night was that David Luiz has come back after his injury. Now, obviously, David Luiz is a big character around the club. We're hearing more reports coming out. You seen the interview with Joe Willock yesterday evening in terms of the mentoring that he's providing to some of these youngsters throughout the club and the pairing between him and Gabriel. I think that David Luiz has been sort of vital in settling Gabriel in the life in England. But the big question I have for you is, after the Man United match and Rob Holding's performance, does David Luiz slot right back into that team?
No. And that's fine. And that's good. And it's healthy, and it's exactly what we're needing right now. I think Holding would have started against City. Let me put it that way. And I think that was the plan. And he allows Arteta to play a certain system that I think he really, really he likes a lot more. And I think that's what we saw against United. I think that's what we would have saw in City had he not gotten injured during the warm up. So I don't think anyone just slots right into this team right now, and that's oddly even Aubameyang, but obviously Aubameyang needs to play. But putting that aside, going back to your question, no, I do not think that Luis just slots in this team. Although I think that there's absolutely a spot here for him, and he can, he's absolutely going to be used in certain games and against certain teams. Holding's not going to play every game, especially coming back from injury. He might. I want to say he might need to take it easy, but he really hasn't, has he? He just he had one training game and he came in and bossed it, and it's just so impressive. And he was only £2 million, I think.
1.5,
something crazy, man. It was, and when you think about like the big games that he turned up against Chelsea in the FA Cup final, again in the FA Cup final against Chelsea, so it's crazy. It's crazy, really, and I'm really impressed by him, and I think he's absolutely been kind of one of those players that, like I said, allows Arteta to play the way he wants. He's not like the greatest at certain things, right? Like there are especially when he's out towards the wing, when he's defending out there, kind of like where the left back or left wing back should be. He can get a little dicey, but then you have Gabriel, who's unbelievable. And it's just unreal, the kind of performances that he's put in and the solidity that he gives us in the back line. So Luis, yes, absolutely a leader, absolutely has a spot in the team, absolutely should be considered for the starting 11. And I know people might not want to hear that, but the reality is that that's how Arteta feels about it. I guarantee that when he's looking at that team sheet, Luis is one of the names he's considering to put in that back line. And it's not because he isn't a good player. I mean, some of those passes from deep were unbelievable against Molde. I mean, world-class passes from the back there, and he has that in his game. That's in Luis's game. But he also has that David Luiz thing where he'll, but he hasn't done it really in a while.
But here's one for you. So two questions for you. First of all, with Rob Holding, I agree. I think that he should hold his place, and I think that if his name was Robinho Holdinho, he would be valued at about 70 million quid now. And that it's just that
or if he was Italian or something.
Yeah, as Arsene Wenger says, it's because he's an unsexy player, if you know what I mean. He's English, he came from the lower leagues.
He's very sexy.
Overly well, the hairline would, and not that I can fucking talk much, but his hairline would argue against it. But with David Luiz, you touched on, there's two questions, well, not two questions, something to touch on is that I think that David Luiz performs at his best when he is coaching somebody else. I remember even, and this is slightly off subject, but I did quite a bit of boxing growing up, but I only realized that I only became a good boxer when I started coaching boxing, because you're so much more detailed when you're explaining to somebody else how to do something, and you're helping them organize themselves. Your game gets better. Your game doesn't suffer from it. It gets better because you're more focused and you're realizing you're setting an example for somebody, so you're not doing stupid stuff. But even just a quick one here for you, John, because you were covering it already. Do you extend David Luiz's contract?
Ooh, that's a great question. Guess what? Yeah, I think so. Okay, so here's the thing. Are we going to get another central defender? We have Mari coming back from injury. We have arguably Callum Chambers, somewhere in the squad. We have Saliba somewhere in the squad. We have Holding. We have, how many defenders do we have? Are we going to really get more?
8, 9, yeah.
8 or 9. And, if we get more, if we get like an, like Mancano or whatever. Yeah. But if that's not a realistic target, we're not going to buy any more young defenders, are we? Are we going to?
But even at that, you have to remember we have
Saliba, we have
Mustafi will be leaving by the looks of it.
Is leaving.
Socrates will be leaving.
Yeah, but that's two that were arguably not really starters in the first. So maybe we get another one. But then again, so we're going to have to get another defender anyway. I don't think there's a detriment to keeping David Luiz. Mm-hmm. I think that there's possibly a detriment to selling him. The only detriment to keeping him is if we don't replace, because there are going to be other ones that are going, because arguably he'd be leaving next season. Socrates would be leaving next season. Mustafi would be leaving next season. So that's 3 gone right now. And we're already having all these defenders and having, issues with health and stuff like that. So, if we do not sign another defender, then that's a potential problem. But there's no downside to keeping him, in my opinion, especially given the young talent and forget about just being experienced. He has Champions League experience too. And if that's where we're really trying to get into that Champions League, assume we do, there's not many players on that side right now who have a lot of Champions League experience.
Yeah.
We have Willian, we have Aubameyang, Lacazette, but we don't really know what the future is going to be over there. But in the defense, Mustafi's going to be gone. Socrates is going to be gone. Chambers, I mean, didn't he play maybe some group games?
He was very good. He was very good before his injury. Right. Arguably our best defender.
Yeah. So that I think is something that I haven't really heard anyone talk about. If we do get into the Champions League, having someone in the squad, especially in defensive aspect of it, because we'll have El Neni and Xhaka who have Champions League. Does Xhaka have He does, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And El Neni certainly does, especially in the group games. So look, that's something to consider. I think that he's, like you said, you hit the nail on the head. He's good with the younger players. He's an absolute leader, and that's, I think, uncontrovertible. Mm-hmm. I'm losing it tonight, man. I'm sorry.
You're with me. It's fine. I don't even know. You sound smart. It sounded good.
Yeah. It's not debatable that he is a good influence on that side. I think we hear it from every single avenue that he is a good player to have in the locker room. So yeah, I would not. If they said we're going to extend his contract another year, I'm not going to be upset.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that it would be nice as well for a player who came in with such a reputation, being called a clown, and we were being laughed at by Chelsea fans when we acquired him. That it would be so good to see him end his career on such a high, some consistent level of performance and mentoring those younger players. And maybe even, look, we've seen many players take avenues into coaching roles and youth academy roles within this club as well. Maybe that's something he could go down. But moving on here, Jared, we're naming a lot of players. There are a lot of sort of swapping and changing. Pepe, Willian, David Luiz, Holding. I always state the fact that during the sort of late 90s, early to mid 90s, that something we've seen from the majority of teams within the Premier League, especially the sort of the top four teams, was consistency in lineups. You could almost name every single team's lineup every week, maybe bar one or two players, depending on injuries and stuff. How important do you think consistency is in lineups? And do you think that we need to start now that we're approaching the Christmas period? We need to start seeing a consistent team from Mikel Arteta.
Yes, and I think we will. While it's less common now than it was back then, you do still see it sometimes. And you look at Liverpool, the 11 guys they're rolling out every game, and they're top of the league for a reason. They've got a lot of talent, but having those guys have continuity and play together often, it has such a big impact. If you roll 11 guys out this week who have never played together, they're going to look a whole lot different than they do if they play every week for 6 months together. So I think that has an impact, a pretty big impact on the performances. And I think we're getting to the point now, and I would say it may start this weekend. I don't know if we're going to talk predicted lineups for the Villa game, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if we saw the same 11 this Sunday as we did last Sunday. I think when you go to Old Trafford, you keep a clean sheet, get a good win, a lot of good performances. I think everybody that was out there kind of earned their spot to stay. And while there may be like one change I would make, like I said, I think we're going to start to try and see that. And it may start this weekend with the same lineup that we saw last weekend as well.
Yeah, I think for me, it's a case of consistency breeds success. Unless something's going horribly wrong or unless somebody is really underperforming, I think that you need to give them time and a chance, because you have to start to develop partnerships within the team, you know what I mean? And that doesn't happen when you're chopping and changing every week. So I would like to sort of now, as I said, it's coming up to the Christmas period. Mikel Arteta should be figuring out his best lineup, his best formation, and just sticking to it and going for it. But Chris, something we have seen, and I think Leicester really laid out the blueprint on how to beat us, which is the low block. Do you expect Villa to do the same? And what do you think that we can do differently this time round to make sure that we don't get that frustrated game and then caught on the break again like we did against Leicester?
For me, Obviously, the Egyptian Pirlo, I saw that already in the chat. I think just his ability, and I know Tom's not a big fan of kind of El Neni in those games where we need to break down the low block, but just seeing his ability to kind of make those forward runs, and he's getting more and more adventurous with his passing. That ability to move the ball quickly could be something that helps to break down a low block. So I absolutely do think that Villa is going to use a low block against Arsenal and try to hit us on the counter, similar to exactly what they did against Liverpool. Just hopefully our defense is going to be more competent than the one that they put out that day. Other things that we could do a bit differently. I look at the Leicester game, and Jared, not to kind of revisit this, but Pepe really struggled to break down a low block. That's not his specialty. If you give him open kind of field ahead of him and he has a lot of space to run into, that's where he's going to be more effective. I actually do think this is a game for Willian. Just his ability to kind of move the ball quickly. He was the 7th and 5th most creative player in the league the past 2 years. He's just got an ability to help break down those teams, and we haven't seen enough of him and Saka on the field at the same time to just kind of have those kind of creative presence to guys who know how to drop into pockets of space and guys who also know how to kind of break down a low block. Because you watch Saka, you watch Willock, you watch Willian, they have that ability to kind of drop in, play a quick 1-2, receive the ball quickly and turn. And just that ability up front is something that we don't have when we're looking at Lacazette, who's more stationary, can act as a focal point and play off to other people that make the run behind him. And then we have Aubameyang, who's really not much of a combination player. His passing's not great, but he can latch onto that final ball. So I just think having Saka and Willian balancing either side, that's going to help a lot to break down a team like Villa. And then just continuing that partnership with Partey and El Neni, I think is going to help a lot. The last thing I was going to say is I think your earlier question was, is Willock going to make the team? I just don't know who I would take out at this point. The only person might be Willian. And you'd move Saka up to the wing and play with a midfield 3 of Partey, El Neni, and Willock. I just don't think that Arteta is going to do that so early. We might see it in another couple weeks after the international break if he keeps performing Europa League. But I just think it's still a little bit too early. The level of competition between Molde and Villa, it's a step up to play Villa, at least a couple steps up. So I don't know if we'll see that yet.
Yeah, and I think it's a case too that you need to see players being rewarded for positive performances, but you need to not overreact either. You know that 2 good games against lower level opposition doesn't probably warrant an immediate start within the Premier League. Given especially the recent performances of that 11 in the Premier League, you know, at Old Trafford. So yeah, for me it's a bit soon, I think. And to be honest with you, I made the point of, why do we need to change the formation of the shape to beat a low block? Really, United were playing quite a low block. I know people were saying that they were a lot more spread out, but it was the aggressiveness and the consistency and our willing to press and work off the ball that caused mistakes that gave us the ball. And to me, that should work against the low block too. You know, you just have to be brave. You have to be persistent with the amount of work you're putting in. And I really think that we might have stumbled upon a formula. But John, I've saved this specifically for you. Even when I was writing, I've got a massive capital letters John written beside this, because I think a big part of the reason that worked at Old Trafford was Mohamed El Neni. And in our WhatsApp group, I remember, I forget who it was, but they were saying we need to give El Neni and Willock a chance. And I made the comment, if you think that either El Neni or Willock can change this side significantly, I don't know what to say to you. You were the one person throughout this that was constantly on the El Neni train. You were sort of psyching us up for him, saying that you would expect him to maybe perform a lot more than people were thinking this season. So what have you made of the sort of rebirth of Mohamed El Neni since his return from loan, and what do you think that this season could be for him, in terms of the scale of his career?
I'm absolutely loving it, and not just because he proved me right, but which is nice. But that's obviously the selfish reason. It's more that I always saw the potential in El Neni, and even when he was on loan, he had a fairly decent, albeit quieter loan spell. But from all the accounts that I was hearing about his loan and players watching him, is that he was a decent player, which is what he was for us. And he was never a player. You always knew he was like the king of consistency. You knew exactly what you were going to get with him. He was so disciplined. He was very calm on the ball. He was never being too rash, but his engine was crazy. It was like him and Ramsey, and those two were like nonstop. And then, I always said that when you look at players like Guendouzi, who are very more maybe technical on the ball and talented, I think that the positional discipline that Guendouzi lacked is something that El Neni absolutely has, and he's a talented player on the ball. He really is. And everyone talks about that Barcelona goal, which was great, but that's not really what I'm talking about. I'm talking about actually watching him, since his days with Wenger, week in, week out, and he was so consistent. And it was just a confidence thing. Everyone always saw him as the squad player, and I get why. He was the quintessential squad player. You knew exactly what you were going to get with him. He was never going to do anything crazy that was going to cause you to lose points. He was always going to run his off, and that was it. And that's what you got with him. It was just a question about being adventurous, putting him in the side and giving him the freedom to kind of maybe go to encourage him, rather than freedom, to go forward, to be more adventurous, to try to affect the game a little bit more, rather than what he would be brought on was just to kind of calm things down and keep everything centralized. And he did an excellent job at it. So when I started hearing them talking about his role in the squad and wanting to see him get started, and I know how Arteta wants to play, I said, this is going to be good. Watch. He's going to have El Neni being more adventurous, getting the ball forward. He's going to be, and what we're learning now is not only does El Neni have that engine, but he has this footballing intelligence that I think people never really noticed until now. Because everyone always thinks that he passes sideways, but he can pass sideways and back, but if you notice, he rarely ever loses the ball. Mm-hmm. And when he makes those passes, it's always to the right foot. It's always weighted well, and it's always out getting people out of pressure. And when he's off the ball, he's always running into space to get it, even sideways and stuff like that, to get other players out of pressure. So that's a smart player. And now when you add that, now Arteta's like, I want you to focus on using that skill. Don't lose the ball, but instead split the defense now. And that's what we're starting to see. And it's like, whoa. This is great. And I'll say this that's great, Mike. That's great. Yeah, he does. The Pyramid Pirlo. So, which is the greatest nickname I think I've heard for one of our Arsenal players in God knows how long. It's amazing. Strong. The Pyramid Pirlo is fantastic. I love it. So look, I'm extremely happy for him. I think going for his loan spell, coming back into the side, his attitude, he's got to be a manager's dream, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, the guy comes in, he's always smiling. He's always willing to put 110% effort in. The guy has the engine like I've never seen. And he's playing for the team. He's just happy to be here. He's kind of like all of us. It's like if Jenkinson actually could play in the midfield, you know? He's just really happy to be here. And, maybe came from a place where there's more pyramids rather, anyway, point is I'm happy for him. And I think that when you're looking at what Arteta has been able to unlock in him, it's something that I saw the potential in, but I'm happy he's proven me right. Not because I'm right, but because it's helping the team and it's showing us that there was this player there. He's only 28. Mm-hmm. That's about the time a midfielder comes into the prime of their career. Mm-hmm. We might have just, and I don't want to like say that, anything crazy, but if he continues to play the way he is, Arteta might have just unlocked this player in the prime of his career, which is the absolute great. And it's great. It's great. I don't know. When does his contract expire? Does anyone know?
I'm not sure. They were talking about, you can look that up. In the meantime, what I'm going to do is I'm going to play this clip courtesy of Mike of this is Mohamed El Neni in the 91st minute at Old Trafford.
Okay. You going to pass that to my guy? I got you. No problem. Oh, Luke Shaw. Okay, that should be fun. Luke Shaw is going to take me off the dribble. Okay, stop. I got you. You can't beat me, Luke. Luke, you're trying to get past me? Forget about it. You might as well pass it back to Lindelof. Lindelof. Doop. Oopsie. I got you. And my name is Mo El Neni.
Gotta love it, right? Yeah, I mean, that's crazy. Look at that. And then when I'm talking about engine, it's not just right off. It's right. He could do it all day. And he talked about how, he played in the street for like 10 hours a day as a kid and stuff like that. And I'm sure that had something to do with it, right? But that kind of a player is what Arteta wants on the side, right? So there you go.
It's amazing. And I think that's what I mean. I think that we stumbled upon a midfield pair, and I really do. I think that and I don't, like, people keep saying, oh, we should play Ceballos in this fixture. Persistence. His attacking qualities were brilliant within that game as well. Don't disregard that just because of the work that he put in. He was very good on the ball, very good at progressing the ball, as was Thomas Partey. But Jared, look, we've seen what happens when a manager persists with a player. You know, that you can have all these sort of preconceptions of what this player is and what his limits are. I think we might be seeing something similar with Lacazette. I can get very frustrated with Lacazette, and I've even made the point that I think he could be just aging slightly quicker than he should be. You know, he seems to have physically slowed down. He doesn't seem to be the same player that he was when he arrived at the club in terms of his movement. But do you think that after the Old Trafford game, I made the statement that I can put up with his lack of goals when he puts in a shift like that? But do you think in the long term that is something that we can persist with? Do you think that we should be persistent with Lacazette, or do you think maybe it's sort of his time's coming to an end?
Well, I don't think he'll be here past this season. I think he's one that's going to move on in the summer. But for the duration of this year, yes, I like him in that spot. I think he's a guy that always felt kind of like he's going to be a 70-minute and out type of player. But for me, it may, I think this season, especially, you said it looks like he's aging quicker and he tires more quickly. I think that's more due to what he's doing when we don't have the ball. The game against United, I saw online people were just killing him for missing the chance that, you know, the ball got tipped away when it was coming across to him in the box anyway. But he was key up front and putting pressure on them better than we've done in any game I've seen in recent memory. When we lost the ball against United, we attacked immediately, put the pressure on him, and regained it very quickly. And I think that's one of the main things that Arteta wants to see out of the team. He understands the importance of that. And while he hasn't maybe looked his best with the ball the last couple of games, I think what he does when we don't have it in those games is exactly what Arteta wants. And I expect him to stay in that spot for the rest of the season. And then I saw someone commented, I thought, maybe somebody can correct me, I thought after this season he would be down to the last year of his contract. Is that not right?
That's what I thought, actually, because everyone's saying 2 years, but it looks like it expires
at the end. Year and next year.
Yeah, it ends at the end of next season.
Is that Mohamed El-Neni? I think they were talking about.
Oh, maybe that was it. Okay.
Mohamed El-Neni has 2 years left on his contract, I think. Which I don't know. It used to be the 2 years seemed like such a long time, but with now the pre-negotiations that we often see with other clubs after, you know, maybe there's a year or 18 months left on your deal, it's if he maintains this level of form, you would like to think that the club will be moving in with a contract offer.
So I'm reading a TalkSport article, about El-Neni. It looks like Billy Hawkins wrote it today, talking about, I guess, El-Neni being in the frame for a new contract, and he seems to think that it's until the end of next season. Mm-hmm. So anyway, sorry.
No, you're fine. That's good. You're providing the information that I'm too lazy to go and access. Yeah, no. So basically, I don't know with Lacazette. See, I think that Lacazette, as you mentioned, that he's sacrificing a lot. I think what he's doing at the minute, I think that people think that he's always been like that. He hasn't. He was never that sort of back to goal hold up player. He wasn't that. You know, don't get me wrong. He didn't shy away from a physical battle, but in terms of having that Olivier Giroud type mold, why do you think he wasn't selected for France? Because that's not what he done, and that's not what was in his natural game. But I don't know. I'm not sure. I think especially, the thing that heaps more pressure on Lacazette is the fact that you have somebody playing left wing who made his career as one of the most prolific strikers in Europe, and he's being played out of position. And I think that just adds more pressure to Lacazette to perform, and I'm not sure whether that's getting to him now or not. But somebody else that is sort of heaping the pressure on the club, John, and we were talking about it just before the podcast, is William Saliba. Now, this situation is very strange to me because I have had a lot of patience with it, but there's certain things that when people are saying, oh, he just needs time to settle, or obviously there was the tragic news that apparently his mother passed away last season and that he's been struggling with that. But look, all of that is very understandable stuff, but there are little things. He was left out of the under-23 squad this evening. He doesn't seem to be getting consistent amount of football. Mikel Arteta made a comment when he was asked about the William Saliba apparently being unhappy with the playing time, and Mikel Arteta says, "I'm fed up with it." Now, some people take that as that was a comment directed towards the media. I'm fed up with the media consistently asking me about this situation. But then other people think that he's fed up with the situation with the player. So what have you made of this situation? And given the level of investment into this young player, do you think the attitude that this is a strange and frustrating situation, do you think that's justified by a lot of people?
Yes, I think that it is a very bizarre situation, and I think a lot of fans are fed up with it. So I'm looking at the actual quote. He says, "I'm fed up with the situation because, as you can see, we tried to find a way in the last few days to give him some football. I explained that he needed that transition year when we decided to buy him, and also send him on loan to Saint-Étienne back to France. For many reasons, that didn't happen. He didn't have the transition year, and he needs to go through that." At the moment, with the amount of central defenders we have in the team, we had to leave him out of the squad, which is painful. Now we have some injuries, and we could have used him, but that is part of the profession. So it looks like, I don't know, fed up because fed up means I'm done, right? I'm done with this.
It's just a very unprofessional manner of language that I wouldn't normally associate with someone as professional as Arteta.
And that's exactly what I was going to say. Arteta's very careful with what he says, right? He's very calculated with the media. Jared, were you going to say something? Sorry.
I kind of, to your point, I was going to say he's very measured in what he kind of divulges and gives out to the media. And I mean, how long's he been dealing with questions about Mesut Ozil? And I don't think he's used this kind of language a single time throughout that whole saga. So,
and I'm wondering,
there's got to be something more.
What
there.
is the fed up with? Is it fed up with the player himself, and maybe there's something going on there? Is it fed up, like you said, with the media? Is it fed up with the fact maybe there's something going on internally where there's some pressure either to play him or not play him? It sounds like he's saying he needs that transition year. Maybe he's a 20 million pound player, so maybe there's some pressure to play him. But then when you look at like other areas of the squad, Mesut Ozil and Pepe, it doesn't seem like that pressure exists as much. So there's definitely a weird situation going on. And then that statement taken at face value, which I think you have to with Arteta, because he's very, very calculated and controlled with his statements. That being said, he's human. Maybe it was just a mess up. Maybe fed up wasn't what he meant, but I'm going to take it at face value because everything he said, see, it's not like maybe he didn't mean that. I think he's fed up with some situation surrounding Saliba, and I think it's who knows exactly what that is. I hope it's more of a, I hope it's a frustration with the fact that he wants to play him, but he knows that he needs to give him some time to settle in or whatever. You know what I mean? And he knows that he's gonna come through. It's gonna take some time, and he's kind of stressed out with that or fed up because I don't know, man. It's so weird. That situation.
It's so frustrating because I think as well, some people that I've had this argument with almost shoot you down for having a sort of conflicting argument with theirs. For example, if I turn around and I say that yes, he's young, yes, he needs a transition year, but when you think of the defenders that we have and how prone they are to making individual errors, that surely he can't be that bad that he doesn't get played. And their counter argument would be, well, maybe those mistakes could be detrimental to his development. They could put too much pressure on him, blah, 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 blah. But there's no doubt it's an absolutely fucking freaky situation,
Yeah.
And another thing as well that we'll have to remember as well, like I mentioned with Nicola Pepe, this isn't a Mikel Arteta player. He didn't go out and purchase this guy. So he's got no loyalty to see that investment work out. Obviously, like I've mentioned, Mikel Arteta seems like a model professional. He seems to me like he would always try to get the best out of every player and sort of individually treat the player as best that he can. But
yeah.
But again, maybe he just doesn't fall under the mold of the centre back that he wants.
Yeah, maybe. But if I'm looking at the statement he makes, so the statement he makes is, at the moment, with the amount of central defenders we have in the team, we had to leave him out of the squad, which is painful. Now we have some injuries and we could have used them, but this is part of the profession. I'm guessing it's this kind of like wanting to give him this, maybe the situation, he wanted to give him the time, and now all of a sudden we need him and we didn't name him for whatever reason. But we know that they're considering a move in January for him. So he even said that they tried in the last few days of the transfer window to find the right club for them, but they couldn't. And then he says, what was the quote? He says, We will review the situation in the next few weeks and sit down with him and see what is the best thing to do, but it will depend on him and other player situations as well. So it looks like there's some kind of a plan for him, right? And it is weird, like you mentioned, you have these players who'll make individual mistakes, and we've been like almost teased with Saliba for the entire, ever since last season. It was like, oh, he's going to be done with his loan, and we're even stopping him from playing in the final so that he won't get injured or whatever. We're not going to pay him extra money, like telegraphing that we have this plan for him, and then all of a sudden it comes, and clearly we could use the central, and maybe that's the frustration, the same one I have right now, but he's the one making the decisions. Why not just put him in? That's what I guess people are frustrated with. Why can't Arteta just play him, and see what happens? What's the big deal? If it's not working, you sub him out.
And,
we have enough players.
And that's a really frustrating thing too, is because I made a point while he was on that season-long loan with St. Etienne to go and watch some of his matches. And the fucking dude looks solid. He looks like a solid player. So when they're saying he's not ready, he's not developed enough, I'm sorry, I just don't take that at face value. I don't.
But who is ready? Is Holding ready to play against Man United after being injured and not getting one training session? What do you like? You're still picking him to go to Old Trafford. So that I don't really buy that because the way I'm looking at it, it's like at least a chance. Like you could play if you play. I saw Xhaka warming up when looks like we were going to take off one of the defenders. He was ready to jump in at center back, and I know he was because that was the only place that he was going to fit in right there, and it did, and he didn't come off, but another center back came off. So we couldn't have Saliba in there at all. We started the Europa League campaign, we had 2 goalkeepers on the bench. We had a goalkeeper in the goal. Night. No, against. Whatever, I'll go back and get it. But one of the Europa League games we played this season, we had 2 goalkeepers on the bench.
It may have been Dundalk the previous. That may have been it. Yeah.
You're telling me that we had 2 keepers on the bench and we couldn't put Saliba there? That really? And we're going. We really need to change this game. Let's put one of our young goalkeepers in midfield. Like I just it doesn't. Compute.
There's a lot of strange things going on throughout the squad, throughout the club, with a number of players, and it's just I think. Something that has been so good with Edu and Arteta has been clarity and transparency in everything they've done, and I think just a little transparency here would do everybody a world of wonders, because no doubt the persistence from the fan base to put pressure on the club to play him or to understand why he's not playing him probably isn't helping the player either. But it's a strange situation. But look, we'll move on from that. Jared, before we go in and do our predicted lineups and our score predictions, something I wanted to touch on was something that I find absolutely fucking ridiculous. It's not too long ago that we come back off the international break and we find ourselves on the verge of another one after the Aston Villa game. What do you make of these international breaks, given the current climate? We've just seen England go into full lockdown again. A lot of other countries as well are going back into lockdown. All restrictions and measures are being tightened. We've seen outbreaks during the last international break between international squads, Portugal, Scotland, to name but a few. What do you make of this international break? And do you think that these should maybe be suspended, or how do you think the FA should approach the problems that they had within the last one?
I mean, I don't like the international breaks on a normal year, so I'd be perfectly fine if they stopped it. But I was a little surprised they moved forward with the last one, and actually pretty shocked that they're going to move forward with it again, given what we saw in the last one. The whole idea, you're never perfectly safe. You can't put these guys in a bubble, but at some point, a certain level of risk mitigation needs to come into play. And you're saying you're having these guys get on airplanes, travel to new areas, be exposed to different people, to play these friendly matches. I'm not a fan of it. I think it's just a little bit silly. We saw the last one, Ronaldo comes back. He tested positive and missed some time. I would be really upset if, England goes abroad and then Maitland-Niles and Saka aren't available for a game we need them because they, got sick playing a friendly against some game that doesn't matter at all. Mm-hmm. So for me, it's just a risk mitigation thing. I don't think it makes any sense to put any of these guys or the rest of the team or their families or friends or whomever else in any sort of danger or any sort of bad spot for a game that doesn't really matter for anything. So the international break I could do without on a good year. So now I'm completely over it this year for sure.
Yeah, and John, something that was a major issue, as Jared mentioned there was outbreaks, and even one of our own players, even though he didn't contract the virus or even get a positive test, he was sanctioned to a mandatory 14-day period of isolation. But something that's really frustrating for me is the differences in rules. Obviously, look, every country has the right to govern themselves, but in terms of this elite bubble that we hear of, surely there has to be some sort of consistency in terms of the level of time, because I think it was even the case that Kieran Tierney had to isolate longer than Cristiano Ronaldo did. Cristiano Ronaldo had to self-isolate for 10 days after testing positive, and Kieran Tierney, after testing negative on numerous occasions, had to isolate for 14 days because the rules in Scotland are different. What do you think of the sort of uniformity in rules or lack thereof?
So this is kind of unprecedented times, right? Obviously, we know that it's really assuming that we're going to keep going on with these international breaks. I'm with Jared there. I don't think it's necessary. I think that it's these games are extraneous games that are friendlies, glorified friendlies, if that. So assuming that they're going to keep doing it, I think there needs to be some uniformity, right? There needs to be this kind of homogenous way of handling the situation in terms of how people are going to be tested and what the quarantine is for the people in this elite sports bubble, right? So I'm right there with you. If they're going to do it, it needs to be uniform so everyone's on the same playing field. Because if not, it just I don't know if it's possible just politically and dealing with international rules and regulations, but as a governing body, UEFA, FIFA, they have major political sway, right? You can't tell me that if they really wanted to get something done that people won't start making exceptions for these players. And it could be bye Carl, it could be in the the safest possible way they can do it, where they make sure that it's at the greatest margin of what would be considered safe for a player, right? So if it's between 10 days and 14 days, they can make it 14 days or whatever. But there's no way that there shouldn't be uniformity if they're going to keep up with it, because it just doesn't make any sense. And logistically, it just ruins a lot of things. And, it's an easy fix, right? It's an easy fix. As long as everyone's on the same page and as long as the proper precautions are going to take, bar not playing anymore, if they're going to have some sort of protection and some kind of prophylactic decision to make sure that people aren't going to be getting infected, they need to do it in a uniform manner.
100%.
I would agree. And one point I would make is, like you guys said, is different countries, so it's tough to get all of them on board. I think this is where the Premier League has a role that they should step in, and knowing that all those players are out on international duty and are subject to different rules, when they come back and play in league, it's a little bit in opposition of the spirit of fair competition to say, if Liverpool and Man City play this weekend and, Raheem Sterling and someone else, if City's missing all these guys and Liverpool isn't, even though they both played in the same competition, that doesn't sit well with me. I think if UEFA or whoever else on a broader level can't get something implemented, I think the league should step in and say, here's our standard, here's what we're going to do. And if it comes down to it and you basically have to take the most severe quarantine of any of the countries available, if a lot of them say a week, but one says 14 days, while we don't want guys to miss games, I think the fairest thing for the league would be to say, if you go on international duty, you're going to be subject to 14-day quarantine if you're exposed. And then it's just a blanket rule for everybody. So we don't have that awkward situation where, I don't remember who we were playing, but it was the case where Tierney was not going to be able to play and somebody on the other squad who was exposed was going to be able to play.
Yeah. Bernardo Silva and Ruben Diaz.
Right. Yeah. See, that's the part that doesn't sit well with me. I think if there's nothing from a higher level, the Premier League should step in and set some sort of standard just to keep the competitive balance there and make it fair for everybody.
Danny says pray for Trumpy. Speaking of political situations, but
Danny,
I know, what a gent. And me and Danny,
he was so funny during this whole election.
Yeah, man,
we won't get into that. Obviously,
he's a good follow on Twitter.
I'm gonna do a shameless plug here for my own channel. Myself and Danny did 5 of my favorite. It's a new segment on my show over on the Gooner Crack, and essentially what we did was we threw out 5 categories. For example, your most hated rival players, and we had to choose 5 from each category and rank them, and it was fucking Danny was absolutely hilarious. There was some profanity and very harsh insults directed towards Harry Kane and Wayne Rooney's children, I believe, but we'll not get into that on here.
Nice.
Yeah, it was full on. It was good though. It was good fun. I'm definitely doing it again. But lads, in the chat, if everybody could throw in their predicted starting 11 for the game against Aston Villa this weekend and your score prediction, we'll start getting the boys. So, John, your predicted starting 11 and your score prediction.
So I think we're going to obviously be playing strong. I think we're going to see Lacazette up top. I think Aubameyang we're going to see on the left. The right side is a little bit weird. I guess because he just played, it wouldn't be Pepe, right? So maybe Willian on that right-hand side. Although, yeah, I'll go with Willian. In the midfield, I think it's going to be Elneny and Partey. I think it's going to be Tierney, Bellerin, and then it's going to be Holding and Gabriel, and then Leno. So did I do enough there?
I think you missed a midfielder.
I missed a midfielder, Ceballos, because I think he wasn't he taken off?
Mm-hmm.
So I think Ceballos might get the start, or we'll see Willian in the midfield and maybe Pepe get the start. It is against. Is it home or away?
Home.
It's at home.
See, but this is the thing about Arteta, right? It's really hard to determine how he's going to approach every single one. Like, I don't know, is it going to maybe all of a sudden we'll see Aubameyang up top, and then Saka on the right, and then Willian on the right, Saka on the left. Maybe it's just difficult to determine. So I don't know, but I'm going to go 3-0 Arsenal.
3-0. Yeah, well, they're sort of leaking goals of late, but let's not forget the 7-2 thrashing they handed out to Liverpool was absolutely fucking mind blowing. Let me see. There was a lineup here. Well, if you thought you were bad missing out one midfielder, John, Christian has missed out probably about 6 players, I think.
Yeah. No, so I got Leno. We got Bellerin. I got Luis. No, I didn't say Luis. I said Holding, Gabriel, Tierney. So that's the back. Partey. I had Partey and Elneny in the midfield, so we're at 5. 6. Yeah, I'm missing one. Yeah, so there'll need to be a third midfielder. Oh man. But look, it's a game that I think we're gonna be able to do well in, and it's very hard for me to go into any match that's not against the big 6 thinking that we can't come away with a win, right? Mm-hmm. So it's just a matter of, is Martinez going to have a worldie against us? If he does, it's going to be difficult to break him down. I imagine that he'll be up for this game more, just as he was for the Liverpool match, and he did pretty well there. So let's hope he has a terrible game. I'm sorry, I love you, Emmy, but I just hope that you hope to leak goals. Yeah,
and I think a big thing in this game as well for me is that the last 2 times I've seen us play against Villa, it's McGinn in centre mid that causes us a lot of bother, and I think that with that solidity of Elneny and Partey, I just don't see teams dominating our midfield anymore, which is an unbelievable thing to say for an Arsenal fan. But Jared, your predicted 11 and scoreline.
Sorry, I just remembered that Grealish plays for Villa.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna say 3-2. I'm changing. Sorry.
Okay, so no, you and I are going to be pretty close on everything. Leno in goal, obviously. I went 4-3-3 also. Bellerin, Holding, Gabriel, and Tierney. I don't think after last week's game there's any reason to change up that back 4 at all. Midfield, I like Partey, Elneny, and Saka. Again, they really didn't step a foot wrong last week. I think they hold those spots. And up front, I have Alba left, Laka center. And kind of had the same thought as you did on the right side. Pepe played the full game yesterday, so maybe I would lean. I think Arteta's more likely to pick Willian, even though, he played a little bit yesterday. My choice would be Pepe, but I think Willian will probably be what we end up with. Mm-hmm. And I had us winning 3-1. Again, Grealish is a stud. I'm with you there. I think they may get one past us, but I expect us to win it.
Yeah, and Danny put into the live chat there, I think we're seeing Mikel trying to figure out different combinations and trying to slowly come to the conclusion of what works best, i.e. no Xhaka. And funny, Danny, I was saying this earlier in the podcast that for me, it's coming up to the Christmas period now, and really what we should start to see now is a consistency in team selection each week, which is why I'm going to say that I think that we might see the exact starting 11 that started against Man United at Old Trafford. In a way, that's what I'd like to see, because I think every single player deserves to start again. But we all know Mikel Arteta can often, he tinkers with the team, as somebody mentioned in the chat earlier. So I think if I was to guess of somebody coming in, I think it would probably be Granit Xhaka. I think he still places a lot of trust and faith within Granit Xhaka. Do I think that's the best option? No, but I think it's probably the most possible. But I'm going to go for a 3-1 win to the Arsenal. Big shout out to everybody in the chat. Danny's popped in late, as I said. Arsenal 3, Villa 1. So that's a sort of common prediction here that I think everybody's getting behind, except John. He went for the sort of pessimistic 3-2. But lads, here, thanks very much for coming on for my first show, my first solo show on the Gooners podcast. It was an absolute blast. Sorry, we lost Carl a while ago. I forgot to mention that he didn't just run away and jump off, or I didn't kick him off. He actually had a leak in his apartment that was causing a bit of havoc, and the repair guys turned up, so he had to jump off. But he'll be definitely back on some other time. So big shout out to Chris. Big shout out to Chris for coming on. Chris doesn't have Twitter, so I can't give you anywhere to follow him. That's a work in progress at the minute. But somebody who's always on Twitter, always causing hassle on Twitter, is Jared. Jared, let everybody know where they can find you and what you have coming up.
Yeah, you can find me right there. The Twitter handle's at JC_AFC, Chicago Gooner on Twitter. And I spend most of my time on there or doing podcasts with Owen. On the Gooner Crack with him pretty regularly. So if you like this show, you'll probably love his, and you can catch us both over there most weeks.
I'm fucking loving that plug, buddy. Loving it.
You can Venmo me later.
Yeah, no worries. And as we said, John hosts the 305 Miami. What is it? It's 305.
It's Arsenal Miami podcast. 305 cast.
Yeah, 305
Miami podcast. 305 cast. Same thing.
Yeah. Are you going to plan to take that back soon? Because I've realized that Tom Canton has started putting the foot on your neck again, trying to increase the pressure just to get that podcast going.
Maybe I'll do one this weekend. Who knows? You have to just keep your eye out.
That's what it's so exclusive. That's all. That's a part. That's a part of its charm. But it's
it's not. But yes, thank you. I appreciate it. But yeah. Thanks for having me on. Definitely go listen to the Gooner Crack. I've been on that podcast. It's a lot of fun, and and obviously this one's a lot of fun too. So if you're not subscribed to this one, do it, and go watch Tom Canton at the Gooner Talk with the tactical breakdowns. Don't forget, those are key.
Love them.
Those are key.
I can't take them seriously anymore. I used to fucking love the tactical breakdowns.
Legitimately, they're really, really good.
They are. To be fair, I've said I haven't seen a man put as much work into fucking learning about it.
He does all the writing and stuff. So like, I'm just waiting. He's gonna run out of footballers eventually. Like he's just done.
Yeah. And I seen he has one out there recently with because there's apparently Dominic Javosley's agent has confirmed that Arsenal are interested in the player, so Tom's fucking in full meltdown. There'll probably be about 50 tactical breakdowns this week about him. So no, but definitely get over there and check that stuff out. And as I said, check the two boys out as well. As we've plugged shamelessly numerous times throughout this podcast, you can find me on my channel over at Gooner Crack, that dodgy spelling there. We'll have a couple of podcasts coming out on Friday. And as I said, I have that one out at the minute with Danny. Get over and check it out. It's timeless. You can watch it now. You can watch it next week. You can watch it whenever. Please watch it now, though. And yeah, get over there, throw us a subscription and subscribe to this channel if you're not, and drop a like onto the video and give Mike and Andy plenty of feedback explaining how superior myself and my guests are to their normal show. But yeah, no, here, thanks very much for tuning in. This has been the Gooners podcast, and we'll see you next week.